There are moments in life when suffering doesn't arrive like a guest knocking on your door. It arrives like a storm that rips the roof off your inner world. No warning, no explanation, no path of retreat. And in those moments, you don't feel enlightened or transformed. You feel exposed, stripped, cornered by your own mind. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there now. It starts with something small, a mistake you made, a moment you regret, a sentence you wish you could take back. And at first, you think you can manage it. You think it's fine, I've been through worse. You think you can swallow it, breathe through it, reason your way out of it. But the mind has a strange way of showing you where your weak spots really are. It pushes, it presses, it whispers, then it screams. Until the thing you thought you could handle becomes the thing you can't escape. What nobody tells you is that emotional pain doesn't always come from the world. Most of the time, it comes from the echo chamber of your own thoughts. The mind becomes a furnace. It tells you you're wrong. It tells you you're broken. It tells you you're losing control. And the more you try to silence it, the louder it becomes, like a trapped animal clawing at the walls. There are moments when it feels like you're drowning in your own head, when no amount of breathing, thinking, praying, or running gives you relief. You reach for something, anything, to pull you out. A habit, a distraction, a belief, a person, but nothing works. You can't climb out of the hole because the hole isn't outer circumstance. It's a collapse happening on the inside. And this is where most people break. Not because the world hurt them, but because their mind convinced them they were alone inside the hurt. But here is the truth no one teaches. The moment you feel abandoned, the moment you feel the most lost, the moment you believe you can no longer hold on, that is the beginning of transformation. Because suffering does not rise to destroy you, it rises to expose you. It reveals the structure of the false self you've been living inside, the emotional cobwebs you never dusted off, the shadows you never faced, the walls you built to protect yourself that slowly became your prison. Pain is not punishment. Pain is a signal flare, a message from the depths of your psyche. There is something here you've been avoiding. But the mind doesn't want you to stay present with that. The mind wants you to panic. It wants you to run. It wants you to identify with every dark thought that flashes across your awareness. This is why the experience feels like a shipping container sitting on your chest. It's not the situation that's heavy. It's the identification with the thoughts around it. And yet, inside the worst moments of psychological collapse, something strange begins to happen. A tiny space appears, a moment of awareness. Not relief, not yet, just awareness. The simple realization, I am watching this. That moment is the crack in the darkness, the beginning of light. But here is the part nobody wants to hear. You cannot think your way out of emotional darkness. You cannot reason with it. You cannot fight it. The moment you try to destroy it, you strengthen it. The moment you resist it, you fuse with it. Everything you push against inside yourself pushes back with twice the force. So the deeper wisdom is counterintuitive. Do nothing. Stay. Watch. Endure. Allow the storm to pass through you without running from it. Because the darkness is not trying to consume you. It's trying to leave you. Every wave of fear, every spike of anxiety, every brutal thought that rises is old material surfacing. It's the emotional debris you've carried for years, maybe decades, finally pushed into the light of awareness. And when you don't run, when you don't distract yourself, when you don't numb it, when you simply stay present and let the storm unfold, that is when the process of purification begins. This is the part that feels impossible. The part where your chest tightens, your stomach sinks, your thoughts spiral, and you feel like you're being shredded from the inside. Where you swear you're disappearing. Where you're convinced something is fundamentally wrong with you. Where hope evaporates. Where the idea of surrender feels like death. But that feeling is not the end. It's the beginning. It is the exact point where the old self, the ego, the emotional identity, the accumulated hurt begins to break apart. What looks like collapse is actually exposure. What feels like punishment is actually awakening. What seems like abandonment is actually the moment the false self loses power. When the storm rises, most people run. They self-medicate, they hide, they escape into their phones, their routines, their addictions, their ideologies, their fantasies. They do everything except face themselves. But the ones who stay, the ones who let the darkness surge through without flinching, those are the ones who discover something extraordinary on the other side. That awareness is not fragile. It does not break. It does not drown. It watches. It witnesses. And in its presence, the darkness burns itself out. So if you are in that place right now, lost, ashamed, overwhelmed, breaking, understand this. You are not failing. You are not regressing. You are not falling apart. You are standing at the threshold of an inner revolution, one you didn't choose, but one life chose for you. And the question now is not, how do I stop this? But can I stay present long enough to let this transform me? Most people never learn what it means to truly stay present inside their pain. They confuse presence with control, with trying to manipulate the moment so it feels safer, lighter, easier to handle. But presence is not control. Presence is the surrender of control. It is the willingness to feel what arises without trying to escape it. Presence is awareness stripped of all strategy. And this is why presence feels like death to the ego. Because the ego survives by controlling your attention, by dragging you into thought, by pulling you into old stories and future fears. The moment you stop running, the moment you stop arguing with your mind, the ego senses it is losing its grip, and so it screams, it flares, it panics. It tries to pull you back into identification. The storm intensifies before it fades. This is the reason the worst psychological episodes often happen right before a breakthrough. You think you're collapsing, but what's actually collapsing is the illusion you've been living inside, the illusion that your thoughts are you, the illusion that your emotions define your identity, the illusion that fear is a warning instead of a projection, the illusion that you are separate from the awareness observing your experience. We are conditioned from childhood to believe that emotions are truth and thoughts are authority, but both are ghosts, shadows projected on the walls of consciousness. When you finally begin to see this, the inner world becomes wild, turbulent, unfamiliar, because you are learning to detach from the very thing that has controlled you your entire life. There is a moment in every deep transformation where you realize something terrifying and liberating at the same time. I am not the one suffering. I am the one watching the suffering. And once that distance forms, even if only for a second, something ancient inside you awakens. A more enduring presence, a more stable awareness, a deeper intelligence than thought. But the journey there is brutal, because the ego does not surrender gently. It fights, it claws, it pulls you into hopelessness. It seduces you with despair. It makes you believe the pain will never end. Many people mistake this phase for failure. They think they're getting worse. They think they're losing their mind. They think they're beyond repair. But in truth, they are experiencing the birth pains of a self that has never been free. Think of it like this. Every suppressed emotion, every ignored fear, every unresolved memory sits like sediment at the bottom of your consciousness. And when present awareness begins to deepen, the sediment rises, it swirls, it clouds everything. This is the chaos before clarity, the darkness before renewal. This is why the moment feels unbearable, because you're meeting the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding, and yet, on some level, you already know. You know that running never worked. You know that distractions eventually lose their power. You know that every attempt to control your inner world only made the chaos stronger. You know that the storm has been waiting for you. You know that this confrontation was inevitable. The most profound transformations in human history happen when people finally stop negotiating with their fear. But here is another truth most people never realize. Despair is not the opposite of awakening. Despair is often the doorway to awakening. Because despair is the exact moment the ego realizes it cannot save itself. The moment its strategies fail. The moment it senses the presence of something greater than itself rising within you. The mind doesn't fear pain. It fears powerlessness. And yet powerlessness is the birthplace of true inner strength. Not the strength of ego, but the strength of awareness. The strength of the self that cannot be touched by thought, emotion, circumstance, or memory. The self that watches all things rise and fall without being shaken. When suffering becomes overwhelming, you often feel abandoned by life, by God, by hope itself. But what if the feeling of abandonment is not a sign of absence, but a sign of transition? What if the darkest moments of your inner life are the exact moments when the light is closest, pressing against the walls of your internal structures, demanding entry? Think of a seed underground. From the outside, it looks like isolation, darkness, burial, death. But inside the seed, a transformation is happening. The shell must crack for the life inside it to emerge. But from the seed's perspective, the cracking feels like destruction. It feels like the end. And yet, that cracking is the only way new life can begin. Your suffering is a cracking. Your despair is a cracking. Your inability to think your way out. Your inability to rise above it. Your inability to fix yourself. That is the shell breaking apart. And what grows after is not the old self, but an entirely different one. But you must stay with the cracking. You must allow the shell to break. You must let the darkness rise without interfering, without running, without numbing yourself. Because the part of you that fears the darkness is the same part that created it. This is why seeking escape only deepens the suffering. When you try to outrun your inner storms, they grow. When you attempt to silence the mind through force, it screams. When you grasp at control, you strengthen the very structures that imprison you. Awareness, however, requires nothing from you. It does not ask you to fight. It does not ask you to resist. It does not ask you to overcome. It asks only that you see, that you observe, that you remain present enough to let the truth burn through the illusions. And in that surrender, something miraculous happens. The darkness begins to dissolve. Not because you defeated it, but because you stopped feeding it. Not because you became stronger than the storm, but because you realized you were never the storm to begin with. For many people, this realization comes only after they reach their psychological breaking point, when the mind's tricks no longer work, when the emotional identity begins to crumble, when the thoughts become so loud they finally reveal their emptiness. Suffering becomes the teacher, pain becomes the guide, and awareness becomes the doorway home. So if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel trapped in your own head, if you feel like you're hanging by a thread, understand this: you're not in a dead end. You're in a transition. You're in the tearing open of the old. You are in the breaking of the shell. And every time you choose to stay present, every time you choose not to run, the light grows stronger. There's a particular moment in every inner transformation where you feel like you're being asked to walk through fire without moving your feet. A moment where the pain doesn't merely sit in your chest. It expands, fills the room, becomes the air you breathe, and yet somehow you remain. You sit, you endure. Not out of strength, but because something deeper than strength refuses to let you run anymore. This is the moment when awareness begins to separate from the emotional storm. You feel the fear, the despair, the heaviness, but you also feel the witness inside you watching it all unfold. It's subtle at first, like a quiet figure standing at the far end of a dark hallway. But once you notice that presence, everything changes. Not because the pain disappears, but because you realize the pain is not happening to you. It's happening within you. And this realization disrupts the entire architecture of suffering. Pain that is mine feels unbearable. Pain that is witnessed feels transformative. But the transition between those two states is agonizing because your conditioning, your entire life story, has told you that you are your emotions, that whatever you feel defines you, that whatever you think is truth. And so when suffering overwhelms you, it feels like you are being erased. You fear you are losing control, losing stability, losing sanity. But what you're actually losing is identification. You're losing your attachment to the old self, the old fears, the old narratives, the old emotional patterns that have shaped you since childhood. And the ego interprets this loss as death. This is why people feel like something inside them is dying, because something is. The illusion is dying. The false self is dying. The emotional identity is dying. And like any creature cornered, it fights for its survival. It fights with thoughts. It fights with panic. It fights with hopelessness. It fights with the temptation to give up. But if you resist the urge to react, if you let the fear move through you without grabbing it, something extraordinary begins to unfold. Because the ego cannot sustain itself in the presence of awareness. It needs your attention. It needs your belief. It needs your identification. When you stop giving it those things, it begins to starve. And as it starves, the darkness rises. It rises not to punish you, but to leave you. It rises to empty itself from your system. Every wave of fear is a release. Every surge of anxiety is a purge. Every moment of hopelessness is an old wound loosening its grip. But you cannot see the exit until you stop running from the entrance. This is why the internal storm feels so relentless. It is not attacking you, it is evacuating you. It is trying to push out everything you've suppressed, the shame you buried, the fear you hid from, the anger you never admitted, the grief you never processed. And for the first time in your life, you're not distracting yourself, you're not numbing yourself, you're not running, you're sitting in it, you're letting it come. This is the moment of purification. When people speak about spiritual transformation, they often romanticize it as peace, serenity, light. But real transformation begins in the dark. It begins when the internal noise becomes unbearable, when your heart races, when your stomach tightens, when your mind feels like a maze collapsing in on itself. It begins when you feel abandoned by everything you trusted, your beliefs, your routines, your self-image, even your sense of God. But that feeling of abandonment is a misunderstanding. You are not abandoned, you are confronted. Because awareness does not appear when you feel strong. Awareness appears when you have no strength left to pretend. When the ego loses its grip, when the strategies fail, when the illusions crumble, then awareness steps forward. Not as a rescuer, but as the truth beneath everything you've ever experienced. And here is another truth. Nobody can save you from this process. No friend, no parent, no teacher, no spiritual figure. They can guide you, but they cannot walk the path inside your mind for you. This journey is yours alone because the transformation must happen inside your awareness, not someone else's. Many people seek comfort during their darkest nights. They search for someone to reassure them, someone to pull them out of the storm. But even if someone tries, they cannot touch the core of what you're experiencing. Because the storm is not external, it's internal, and only you can sit through it. Only you can bring the darkness into the light of your own awareness. This realization can feel cold. It can feel like isolation. But in truth, it is empowerment. Because the moment you realize no one can save you is the moment you discover you can save yourself, not by force, not by strategy, but by surrendering to the truth of your experience. Suffering ends when resistance ends, not when circumstances improve, not when your thoughts change, not when you fix yourself, but when you stop running. There is a profound strength in doing nothing, not out of apathy, but out of awareness. Doing nothing means not reacting to the fear, not fueling the thoughts, not fighting the emotions. Doing nothing means letting the storm express itself without identifying with it. This is the essence of awakening. But make no mistake, the process is excruciating. You will feel waves of fear that make no sense. You will feel sorrow that appears out of nowhere. You will feel anger that doesn't match the moment. You will feel heaviness with no cause. This is not failure. This is release. Your system is clearing decades of emotional residue, layers of survival mechanisms, memories imprinted into your nervous system. Each wave that rises is old material passing through awareness for the first time, without suppression. And what passes through awareness dissolves. This is why staying present is the most powerful spiritual act a human being can perform. It is not glamorous, it is not blissful, it is not poetic. It is raw, intense, destabilizing, and humbling. It forces you to face everything you've avoided. It teaches you to sit in the fire without trying to escape it. But here is the revelation waiting for you on the other side. The fire does not burn the real you, it burns everything that is not you. And when the burning is done, what remains is clarity, a clarity that cannot be shaken by circumstance, emotion, or thought. A clarity that sees life as it is, not as fear paints it. A clarity that reveals the difference between the mind's noise and the truth beneath it. This is the beginning of inner freedom, not the dramatic, triumphant freedom people imagine, but a quiet, steady freedom. A freedom rooted in awareness. A freedom that emerges when you stop identifying with the storms inside you. So if you are in the darkest moment of your inner life, understand this. You are not breaking. You are being unmade. The shell is cracking. The old self is dissolving. And awareness is rising. There comes a moment, often unexpectedly, when you begin to sense a space inside yourself that was always there, but somehow hidden beneath all the noise. A space that feels untouched by fear, untouched by shame, untouched by the heaviness that has followed you for years. At first, it flickers like a candle in a storm, fragile, uncertain, almost unreal. But if you stay with your experience long enough, if you remain present through enough waves of darkness, that flicker grows. And the extraordinary thing is this: it doesn't grow because the darkness weakens. It grows because you stop fighting it. People think strength is the ability to overpower their inner demons, to conquer their fears, to wrestle their pain into submission. But the deepest strength a human being can discover is the strength to let things burn, without running, without interfering, without identifying. This is the paradox at the heart of awakening. The less you do, the deeper the transformation. True presence is not passive. It is active in its stillness. It is alive, alert, deeply aware. It watches every thought that rises, every emotion that screams, every memory that flashes across the mind, and it does not flinch. It does not collapse. It does not cling. This is the presence that dissolves darkness not by force, but by illumination. And this illumination begins to reveal truths you were never taught. One of those truths is that your suffering was never personal. It felt personal because the ego wrapped itself around every emotion, every failure, every thought, every wound. But when awareness begins to deepen, you realize your inner storms are not unique to you. They are expressions of the human condition itself. Fear, shame, anxiety, confusion. The emotional architecture of suffering is universal. Every human being carries it. Every lineage carries it. Every generation inherits it. You are not suffering because something is wrong with you. You are suffering because you are human, and you are finally confronting the inner structures most people spend their lives avoiding. And when this realization dawns, something inside you relaxes, not because the pain disappears, but because the narrative built around it collapses. The story of being broken, unworthy, hopeless, abandoned, that story loses its power. Pain becomes pain, not identity. Fear becomes fear, not destiny. Thoughts become thoughts, not truth. This is the quiet beginning of freedom, the separation of awareness from identity. But the journey is far from over, because once you start to see the structures inside you, you also begin to see the structures inside others. You begin to understand that the way people act, their anger, their coldness, their selfishness, their confusion is not personal, just as your suffering is not personal. People operate from their conditioning, their emotional wounds, their unresolved storms. And this realization births a new form of compassion, not the soft, sentimental kind, but the kind that sees clearly. A compassion that isn't about saving others or fixing them, but about understanding them. You stop trying to rescue people from their suffering because you recognize that suffering is often the only doorway they have into awakening. You stop trying to change them because you realize that real change cannot be forced from the outside. When people say you can't save everyone, they're not being cynical, they're being accurate. The transformation you are undergoing is internal, intimate, deeply personal. No one else can do this for you, and you cannot do it for anyone else. At best, you can embody the clarity you found. You can become a presence that others feel safe around. You can speak from awareness instead of fear. But even then, people will only hear you if they are ready, and many are not ready. Most people still cling to their narratives. Most people still identify with their wounds. Most people still run from their inner storms. Most people would rather stay in familiar suffering than step into unfamiliar freedom. And that is their path, not yours. This is where a deep boundary emerges inside you, one that is not cold, but clear. You stop sacrificing your inner peace to carry other people's pain. You stop betraying yourself to make others feel better. You stop trying to save the world out of guilt or ego or fear of being alone. You start recognizing that your responsibility is not to fix humanity, but to awaken within yourself. And when you awaken, the world changes, not because you forced it to, but because you are no longer contributing to its unconsciousness. This clarity can feel like loneliness at first. You realize you cannot lean on others to validate your experience. You realize your inner journey is invisible to everyone around you. You realize that most of what you've lived through cannot be explained in words, but slowly, a different feeling takes root beneath that loneliness, a sense of sovereignty, a sense of something unshakable growing within you. Eventually, you begin to understand a truth that many spend their entire lives running from. You do not need the world to understand you. You do not need approval, agreement, reassurance, because the storm you survived taught you something the world cannot teach, that your inner foundation is stronger than anything that happens outside of you. And once you realize this, a profound shift happens. You stop living in reaction, you stop living in fear, you stop living as a hostage to your thoughts and emotions. You begin living from awareness, from clarity, from presence. Life becomes simpler, lighter, quieter. Not because circumstances change, but because you are no longer entangled in the noise of the mind. And strangely, this newfound clarity does not make you detached from life. It makes you more present in it. You feel more deeply. You listen more closely. You respond more authentically. You stop carrying other people's storms, but you remain open, grounded, and aware. You become a witness to the world instead of a prisoner of it. This is the birth of a new self, not the small, fragile self built out of fear, but the deeper self that has always been there, waiting beneath the noise. A self rooted in awareness, untouched by the storms that once defined you. So if you feel something shifting inside you, if you feel old patterns breaking, if you feel the shell of your identity cracking, understand this: you are not unraveling, you are awakening. The process is intense, chaotic, unpredictable, and often painful. But it is not a breakdown, it is a breakthrough. And the deeper you go into this process, the more clearly you will see that nothing inside you was ever wrong. The suffering was not a flaw, it was an invitation. The darkness was not an enemy, it was a messenger. And the pain was not punishment, it was the first step toward liberation. There is a stage in this inner transformation where the world begins to look different, even though nothing around you has changed. It's subtle at first, a softening, a quietness, a sense that the noise in your mind is no longer the ruler of your life. You start noticing moments between thoughts, moments of stillness that feel strangely familiar, as if you've touched this place before in some forgotten lifetime. This presence is not new, it was always there, but for the first time, you can feel it without needing the storm to disappear. And that is the sign that something profound is unfolding. The emergence of a self that does not vanish when pressure comes, that does not collapse when fear rises, that does not shatter when old wounds surface. A self that stands in awareness instead of drowning in emotion. People often believe the goal of inner work is to eliminate suffering, to silence fear, to extinguish pain. But transformation is not the removal of darkness. It is the illumination of darkness. The fear may still arise, the anger may still flare, the sorrow may still return. But they no longer control you. They no longer define you. They pass through you like weather instead of possessing you like identity. This is the turning point where you begin to understand that freedom is not the absence of storms. It is the ability to remain the sky while the storms pass. And when you touch this truth, even for a moment, something inside you exhales. You realize you've spent your entire life believing you were the waves, when in reality, you were the ocean. You believed you were the thoughts, when in reality, you were the awareness observing them. You believed you were the pain, when in reality, you were the space in which the pain rose and fell. This shift does not make you invincible in the way the ego imagines. It makes you invincible in a far deeper way. You can feel everything without being destroyed by anything. But freedom has another layer, one most people do not expect. Once you detach from your inner storms, the storms of others become more visible. You begin to see the unconscious patterns in people's behavior. You see the fear behind anger, the shame behind defensiveness, the insecurity behind arrogance, the confusion beneath cruelty. You see that people are not reacting to you. They are reacting to their inner battles, and this awareness gives birth to a new kind of clarity about relationships. You realize that attachment rooted in fear is not love, people-pleasing is not kindness, self-sacrifice is not compassion. These behaviors come from ego, not awareness. They come from a need to be needed, a fear of abandonment, a desire for validation, a longing to be seen as good. Awareness reveals that true compassion does not require rescuing anyone. It does not require you to carry their pain. It does not require you to abandon yourself to soothe another storm. True compassion is simply the ability to see clearly your own darkness and theirs without collapsing into judgment or entanglement. And in this clarity, you learn one of the hardest but most liberating truths of awakening. You are not responsible for anyone else's transformation. Not your parents, not your friends, not your partner, not your children, not the world. You can inspire, you can support, you can guide, you can embody, you can shine light, but you cannot walk into anyone else's storm for them. Every human being must face their own darkness, and many will resist this path. They will cling to their wounds, defend their illusions, protect their pain. They will blame, project, judge, attack, withdraw. They will fight to keep the very suffering that harms them because it is familiar, because it is known, because it is the identity they've lived inside for years. And when you realize this, you stop trying to force healing. You stop trying to convince people to see what they're not ready to see. You stop trying to rescue others out of guilt or obligation. You stop sacrificing your inner peace to preserve their illusions. You begin to protect your awareness like the sacred ground it is. This boundary is not rejection. It is wisdom. It is maturity. It is clarity. Because the truth is this: people do not awaken because someone saved them. They awaken because life forced them into their own fire. They awaken because their illusions collapsed. They awaken because suffering became undeniable. They awaken because they finally stopped running. That moment cannot be given to a person. It must be lived. And here's the deeper beauty. Once you understand this, your relationships change. You no longer cling. You no longer fear losing anyone. You no longer bend yourself into shapes that hurt you. You begin relating from awareness instead of survival. There is more honesty, more depth, more presence, more authenticity. You stop needing people to be different in order to feel safe. You stop needing the world to align with your expectations. You stop needing life to unfold according to your wishes. The inner world that once ruled you becomes a weather pattern, not a dictator. And as your inner storms quiet, the outer world becomes less threatening. Situations that once triggered you now pass through you like wind through trees. Conversations that once left you spiraling now feel like noise you can watch without absorbing. The old emotional reflexes fade. The mind's grip loosens. The heart opens. This is the emergence of the inner adult, the self that does not collapse under emotion, the self that does not seek approval, the self that does not bargain for love, the self that does not fear discomfort, the self that stands in truth even when truth is inconvenient. And slowly, a realization dawns that changes your entire relationship with suffering. The pain you carried for years was not a curse. It was a teacher. It pushed you into the depths of your mind. It forced you to confront yourself. It broke the shell of who you thought you were. It revealed the structures of fear and ego that ran your life. It opened you to presence, to awareness, to truth. Suffering was the fire that burned away illusion. Awareness was the light that guided you through the flames. And the self that emerges is not a new identity. It is freedom from identity. You begin to understand why ancient teachings speak of dying before death, of the ego's death being the rebirth of the soul, of the inner dark night that precedes the dawn. These are not metaphors. They are descriptions of what happens when awareness begins to awaken within a human life. And you realize something else. Life did not abandon you during your darkest moments. Those moments were the very places where life was reshaping you. The storm was not punishment. It was purification. The darkness was not an enemy. It was a passage. The despair was not a dead end. It was a threshold. And on the other side of that threshold, a truer you begins to emerge. There is a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when you finally realize that the storm inside you has changed. Not because it has disappeared, but because it no longer terrifies you. The waves still rise, but they do not swallow you. The thoughts still echo, but they no longer define you. The emotions still surge, but they pass through you like wind through an open window. You recognize this shift, not because life feels perfect, but because life finally feels spacious. You stop waking up with dread. You stop dreading your own mind. You stop fearing the next emotional trigger. You stop believing every thought you hear. There's a new presence behind everything. Quiet, steady, observing. This presence does not arrive dramatically. It does not announce itself. It does not come with fireworks or spiritual visions. It emerges like dawn, gently replacing the night. A subtle increase of light, a softening of the shadows, a sense that something within you is no longer fighting life. And when this presence becomes clear enough, you feel an inner knowing that you cannot explain, that you have crossed a threshold, that the person you were, the one who collapsed into fear, who identified with every emotion, who treated thoughts like commandments, that person is slowly dissolving. But here's the beauty. The new self does not replace the old with force. It replaces it with understanding. You begin to see that every storm you endured was part of an inner maturation. Every wave of fear made you stronger. Every moment of despair loosened the ego's grip. Every breakdown was a breakthrough waiting to happen. You were not failing. Life was rewriting you, and now you stand in a clearer space. A space where awareness is not something you try to access. It is something you live in. A space where life unfolds without the resistance that once defined you. A space where even your flaws no longer feel like flaws, but like human patterns you can watch without shame. This is the beginning of what many traditions call awakening, not the supernatural awakening of myth, not the blissful awakening sold in self-help books, but the grounded awakening that happens quietly inside ordinary lives. An awakening rooted in presence, clarity, and the dissolution of false identity. You feel lighter not because life has become easy, but because you are no longer carrying the weight of who you thought you had to be. You no longer perform for the world. You no longer negotiate with fear. You no longer beg life for safety. You finally understand that safety does not come from controlling the world. It comes from understanding yourself. And in this understanding, a new relationship with life begins to bloom. You stop rushing. You stop forcing, you stop clinging, you stop escaping, you stop abandoning yourself. You begin to trust that whatever rises in you can be faced. You begin to trust that awareness can hold anything. You begin to trust that pain is not an enemy, but a messenger. You begin to trust that life is not here to punish you, but to wake you. And slowly, the world becomes more vivid. Colors feel richer. Silence feels deeper. Conversations feel more real. The smallest details, light on a wall, a passing breeze, the sound of footsteps, feel like reminders of something sacred. This clarity does not remove the challenges of life. Pain still comes, loss still comes, uncertainty still comes, but they are no longer interpreted as threats to your existence. They are experiences passing through awareness. You no longer collapse into storms. You witness them. You no longer drown in emotion. You allow it. You no longer become your thoughts. You observe them. This is inner freedom, not the freedom of escaping life, but the freedom of meeting life as it is. And from this freedom, a new kind of strength emerges, a strength that doesn't need validation, a strength that doesn't need certainty, a strength that doesn't need control. A strength that comes from being grounded in the one thing that cannot be taken from you, your awareness. You can walk into difficult moments without fear. You can sit with discomfort without resisting it. You can face your past without flinching. You can move into the future without anxiety. Because the storms that once terrified you have become familiar. You've seen them rise, you've seen them fall. You've seen that none of them could destroy you. You've learned that darkness is not something to defeat, it is something to illuminate. And in this illumination, a realization dawns that changes everything. The world is not your enemy, but your mirror. Every experience, every trigger, every challenge reflects the places within you that are ready to be seen. The world is not here to break you, it is here to reveal you. You no longer take life personally. You no longer take people personally. You no longer take thoughts personally. You no longer take emotions personally. You begin to live with an open hand instead of a clenched fist. You allow life to move through you instead of trying to control its flow. You begin to understand what surrender truly means, not giving up, but becoming available to reality, not collapsing, but opening. And as you open, a quiet joy begins to emerge, not the high of excitement, but the calm joy of simply being present, a joy that comes from nothing external, a joy that cannot be shaken by circumstance, a joy that requires no explanation. This is the joy of being aligned with your own awareness. This is the joy of no longer fighting yourself. This is the joy of finally coming home. And in that homecoming, you realize something profound. Your life was never about avoiding pain. It was never about achieving perfection. It was never about becoming someone impressive or admirable. It was about awakening to the truth of who you are beneath the noise, the narratives, the wounds, and the illusions. You were not meant to live as a prisoner of your mind. You were not meant to live as a hostage to emotion. You were not meant to live as a character in a story written by fear. You were meant to wake up. You were meant to see. You were meant to become free. And you are, slowly, painfully, beautifully. You are becoming free.